Meeting to order. We already did the salute to the flag before executive session. Did we have a roll call already, Rod? Or no?
We did not.
We did not. Okay, so we'll have the roll call now.
Mr. Byrne? Here. Mrs. Swerner?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mrs. Shaw?
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Here.
Mr. Markarian?
Here.
Mr. Syatt? Here. Madam President?
Thank you. I'd like to draw your attention to the statement of public notice in your agenda. The meeting is being recorded, and there are two times during the meeting when we welcome input from the public. The first is on the public forum on agenda items, if you would like to speak on anything that's on the agenda, and then later in the meeting is a public forum for any other items that you'd like to speak to us about. If you come up, please put your name and address on the clipboard and tell us who you are and before you start speaking, please. Okay, we are up to our student representative, who is Kunal Kapadia, and welcome, Kunal.
Hi, thank you. So over the past 2 weeks, I think it's been since last time I saw you guys. It's been 2 weeks. Yeah. So we're just getting into the swing of things at Ridge High School. This week is like the Ridge High School Senior Spirit Week. So the senior class is making up their own Spirit Week. Today was Morning Monday, so it was like a PJ day, which was really fun. And then tomorrow is like a Tourist Tuesday, so dressing up as like a tourist. Wednesday is like Wall Street Wednesdays, which is like formal attire, and then Thursday is That So 70s Thursday, so it's basically like a throwback. And then Wednesday and Thursday, the seniors get their class shirts for the homecoming tailgate and the homecoming dance, which is on Saturday. So on Friday, we're all just going to wear our class shirts, which will be fun. And then for the school spirit days, Thursday is USA Day and Friday is Ridge Gear Day. So Friday will be a good like unified day for the school, which will be nice. The senior tailgates from 5 to 7. We're just getting like music and stuff done for that. We had like our sign-up sheet last week, so I think that was getting circulated around for the seniors. And hopefully we have a lot of people show up to the homecoming dance, which is from 6 to 9 on Saturday. We're also organizing for that. I know me and other student government officers, school officers, are going to go to Party City and buy like lights and stuff like that, for the dance. So hopefully we get a good showing from our school for that. Other than that, there's not much that we're doing. We're still trying to get the student government community service project on our way, and we're gonna order school water bottles, like Ridge customized water bottles, as a fundraiser as well. I'm getting my sampling Wednesday, so if that turned out to be good, then we'll definitely send in the order for the water bottles sometime at the end of this week. So that's about it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
If anyone in the community wants to get a Ridge water bottle, how would they go about ordering one?
That's a great question. If there is interest, I'm sure we'd have leftovers, or actually I should talk to my student government advisor about that. That's a really good idea, if other people want it, because then obviously we could order more and then people could buy it, and then I guess any leftovers could be sold next year or something like that. So I guess we can just order like a lot, and then if there's a lot of interest, then we could put in another order, or we can and if like there's not much interest, then like the bottles could go to next year for people to buy as well. So that's a good question. I'll talk to my student government advisor about that.
Maybe they could just do a sale at lunch of extra ones, and if parents wanted them, they could just have their kids buy them a water bottle and bring it home for them.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Definitely pitch that.
Are kids allowed to sell things at school? I thought they weren't.
If it's a sanctioned fundraiser by the principal, they could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I know this is a little trivial, but speaking as a mother whose kid has come home with a soaking wet backpack on numerous occasions, when you get your samples in, fill it up, turn it upside down, shake it around, make sure they're very leak-proof. And then we will be buying many of them.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We are now up to Superintendent's Report. There are 2 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Karen? Someone second? Bev? Thank you. Nick, do you want to speak first and then we'll vote on them afterwards?
There were two items. One is the standard HIB report. These are all incidents that we have had so far this year. I believe there were 3 of them on the report. And the field trip destinations, I sent some additional information out today. If you didn't get that, I'll just remind the board what I noted about that. The 2 trips are on school days. The kindergarten trip is to a farm where they learn about apple trees. They do a unit in kindergarten on trees. They also do a unit on animals, and there are animals at the farm. Apparently, there are 6 learning stations, which also includes a pumpkin patch. And that's the plan for the Sun High Farm, I believe it's called. The second one is another destination, and I was surprised that we hadn't already approved this, but when we looked at our list of approved destinations, the Berners Township Library apparently wasn't there, and the a cappella choir, when they do their caroling, they go around town to various locations, including things like the Oak Ridge Senior Center, and this would be another destination that they want to put on their circuit for that day. That's also happening during the school day. Both of them actually are on Mondays.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. And I think Mr. Markarian is going to give a brief update from the Ridge rotating drop schedule planning or exploratory committee, whatever it's called,
Right.
that met last week.
So we've been taking a look at the high school schedule and the rotating drop schedule in particular. And one of the things that's common to a few different alternative schedules for schools involves something called the unit lunch, which is kind of an all students eating lunch at the same time scenario. So in order for the rotating drop schedule idea to work, we would need to find a way to feed all of our students during this unit lunch at the same time, essentially. And that would probably be during a period that was anywhere from 50 to 60 minutes long. And, you know, we have a large number of students at the high school. To try to feed them all in the existing cafeteria would not work. So we had a meeting. Rod and I met with the food service consultant and 2 architects and with Frank, and we took a walk around the cafeteria. And you know, Frank told me that at most they feed around 400 or so students during a given lunch period. And you know, we're talking about scenarios that involve feeding 16, 17, 1,800 students. And so we kind of came to the conclusion that regardless of the number of configuration changes that we might be able to do in the existing space, we didn't think it was feasible to feed all of those students at the same time within the existing 4 walls of the cafeteria. What we talked about was adding service lines into that existing space, which we had ideas for 2 or 3 service lines that we could add to the space that would obviously allow us to help students get more food, or more students to get their lunch, rather, in a given period of time, but that the challenge, of course, would be in seating. You wouldn't be able to add service lines and maintain the same seating, so you wouldn't have enough seating space for the students to eat in that space. And we talked about that with the unit lunch, using alternative locations around the building to have students eat. So because of that issue, we went to the health department and also to the fire official to find out if they would have any concerns that would blockade us from having students eating lunch in places besides the cafeteria. And they really don't have anything that could stop us from doing it. They shared some concerns. They would want to see how it's working. The fire official would want to see how it was working to make sure that we weren't blocking exits. And the health department would like to look and make some recommendations. You know, obviously, they're concerned with cleanliness, and it would create more challenges, as we've acknowledged, in custodial staff to do the cleanup in situations where we were letting students eat outside the cafeteria. So we acknowledge that, but there was no real blockade from either of those agencies, but they did express some concerns, especially the health department. However, I think that despite those circumstances with the health department and the fire officials, we really feel like our biggest hurdle would be from a facility perspective and trying to create a scenario that we could actually feed all those students. So what we asked the architects to take a look at was kind of a concept plan, take some time to think about it, just conceptually, and give us some ideas looking at our whole floor plan. Because as you saw just walking into the auditorium this evening, there's a large area outside of the auditorium where we often have food setups for various events in the auditorium. Things like a movable service line or kiosk could be set up in a space like that. There are a couple other spaces around the building that kiosk or service lines could be set up. Including the end of the 600 wing, the area that represents the joining of the 700 wing to the old building, the atrium area, they call it, where we have the large flight of steps that goes up to the 700 wing. Is a big open space down by the library. And of course, there's a large open space in front of the new gym. So there are places that could conceivably work, but it's going to be a complicated effort to overcome. And, we don't want to rush and try to do something that's going to be really expensive to put into place. We'd rather take our time. So we think that this hurdle is significant enough that it's really probably not realistic to do anything for the 16-17 school year. We talked about trying to have a presentation that was more comprehensive on the 19th, a week from today, but there's not going to be much more to share than what I'm telling you now until we can get some more information about what we might be able to do facility-wise. And given that we have our architects working on a major project right now to get our HVAC projects for next summer out to bid, that posting is going out this week, so they're finishing that up, and it's just not realistic that they're going to have something to us by Monday for me to share with you. But I think by November, we could have some concept ideas that we could share. And so I don't think that that's going to put us in a reasonable time frame. I won't say 100%, but 99% sure that we couldn't do anything for 16-17 unless they come to us with some miraculously inexpensive and easy to implement plan, which I kind of think is unlikely, but I don't want to sell them short. Let's see what kind of ideas they come back with. So we'll leave a little tiny crack out there, but realistically, I don't see this happening for 16-17. And when you consider the fact that changing to 60-minute periods from 40-minute periods would represent some different challenges to staff. If the board ever decided to go that way, it wouldn't hurt us to have more time to work with the staff about what kind of strategies they might use with the students in teaching in a 60-minute environment instead of a 40-minute environment. So I'm still committed to working on this and presenting the idea to the board so the board can consider options associated with improvements or what I believe would be improvements to the high school schedule. I just don't think we're going to be ready to roll anything out for 16-17, and I think it's realistic that we could probably provide some new information in November. So that's pretty much where we ended up when we had our last meeting.
Can I just chime in a little bit? We did discuss, we got the same report at curriculum on Friday, and we did discuss it there with the curriculum supervisors in terms of the other issues that board members were concerned about hearing more about, like special education and how that would be impacted with a longer teaching block and science labs and some of the other issues that people have brought up. So the curriculum supervisors kind of know that we're kind of waiting to hear back from this facilities, perspective and see what we're dealing with. And then in the meantime, they can be preparing, information on those other topics. So that's kind of how we left it, right, Linda, at curriculum?
Are you going to share what Jean and Allison said?
Sure. Do you want to? You do it. No, go ahead, because I don't remember.
Well,
Go ahead.
I don't recall which of either Linda or Robin, but someone mentioned that board members had concerns about what the special education department felt would be the impact of adding the minutes, and they were remarkably positive on all fronts. They felt that it added value in every area for them, and they were going to be able to use that time wisely and to the benefit of the students.
John?
When Nick, you were talking to the areas that are open, you didn't mention the gym. There is a, B gym, I think it's called. Would that be a feasible possibility for?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about was where the students would eat. And obviously, if you have serving lines in the same four walls of where they're eating, that could certainly be convenient. I think it's certainly a possibility to look at the gyms as places that you might be able to have kiosk service as well. And, we didn't really restrict the architects. We said, you know what, rip off the roof, think of it as an open floor plan. Where do you think this might be a possibility? When we think about the gymnasium spaces and you think about sort of portable service lines that you can wheel to the side and you can push into the corner, it might work. We just have to look to see what kind of space we have. And the difference between some of the areas I mentioned and the gyms is that classes actually go into the gyms and use them. So, you have to sit there and say, is there a safe place that I can store things when they're not in use? And that's one of the other challenges that, we're looking at is, if we had portable folding tables that we set up just for the lunch and then we put them away every day, where would we store the tables? Where would we store the chairs? Or would we just tell the kids, you know what, we're going to pull out the bleachers and you eat in the bleachers? So there's a lot of logistical things like that, but we didn't really restrict the thinking on it, and, I'm certainly open to any idea that might make this a possibility.
One other thing, in the current cafeteria, the tables are round, which are somewhat inefficient as far as packing in a number of kids. So if maybe someone could look at that possibility also is condensing the space required.
We talked about that, yeah.
Okay.
One of the things we talked a lot about the idea of, looking at the wall space, which is essentially unused in a lot of areas there. And, if you think about food courts and airports, a lot of times you'll see sort of stand-up seating, if you will, or stand-up dining with, small counters, small little round tables that 5 people could sit around and, you have a place to put things down. And you're standing, you're not really sitting. But it might allow for more people to utilize the space. So we did look at the tables and recognize that some of those tables are not exactly the most space-conscious setups.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. We're up to public forum on agenda items. If there's anyone that has a comment on anything on the agenda. I don't see anyone down there coming up. Okay, we're now up to finance. We have 4 items. Would someone like to make a motion for the 4 items for finance? Linda? Would someone like to second? Karen R. Karen R. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Elaine's not here. The first one is a regular standing item. The second one, yeah, number 2. Number 3.
Number 3 I can speak to.
Okay, go ahead. Sure.
So we currently have a facilities, grounds, maintenance, and management of same contract with Aramark, which was obtained via the competitive contracting process 4 years ago. We're in the last year that we're allowed to renew that contract pursuant to the terms of the original contract, and therefore we need to go through that process again. Part of that is because we're looking to use competitive contracting, which allows us to consider not just cost, but other evaluative criteria. We need to request in advance the board's authority to use that process, and that would allow us to do this with the intent of going out within the next 30 days or so to bid and then reporting back to the board either in late November or early December the results of that for an award.
Thank you. And number 4 is a student from out of district coming into district. Does anyone have any questions on the finance items? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes?
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. Under personnel, we have 9 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Bev? Somebody would like to second? John? Thank you. I think they're all fairly typical personnel items. Oh, and there's on the
There's 2
addendum.
on the
Make sure you look at the addendum. 8 and 9 are on the addendum. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Let me catch up a little bit, come back.
Okay.
Sure. Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes?
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you.
And personnel is meeting this Friday, and I reported out on our last meeting, so I have nothing new to report.
Thank you. Curriculum?
Curriculum met last Friday, and I'll be reporting out at the next meeting.
Policy?
We just met today.
Okay. So we'll get the report next time.
Monday, yeah.
Okay. And advocacy?
I actually have a report. Advocacy met on October 5th, which is, we met with the PTO presidents on that day, and we told them about the Parents for Substance-Free Kids wanting to set up tables at back-to-school night and upcoming events at the PAC to spread word about the awareness of their mission to stop underage drinking in town and their Safe Home A to Z directory. And we reminded all the PTO presidents of the upcoming events in town, one being on Wednesday, October 21st, there'll be a presentation called Not in My Basement, the reality of hosting underage drinking at the Ridge PAC at 7 p.m. The Bernards Township Municipal Alliance Against Substance Abuse is partnering with the Ridge PTO and William Mann PTOs to bring the program to the PAC. It is meant for parents only. And we asked all the PTOs to advertise to their parents. And I sent them the flyers for the newsletters. And a board member asked if there was a possibility to tape this event and post it online on our website. And Mr. McCarry was going to look into that possibility of doing that. On December 17th, former NBA player Chris Herron is going to be coming to the Ridge PAC to talk about his struggles with substance abuse and how it affects his life. And this event is meant for students and parents. And we asked the PTOs to help get the word out about this event, which is sponsored by the Community in Crisis Group. And I will be sending out a flyer to all the PTO presidents once it's available. We talked about Election Day. 3 of our incumbent candidates are running uncontested. That's Robin, Bev, and me. And we're all going to be going to the William Mann PTO meeting on this coming Wednesday just to briefly introduce ourselves and take questions if parents have them at the end. It was really the only meeting that we could all get together, the 3 of us. We couldn't go to all the other PTO meetings. In terms of park, Linda and Robin recently attended a New Jersey Board Association meeting with Dr. Barry Erickson, the Assistant Commissioner, Chief Performance Officer for the NJ Department of Education, and she gave an update on park. Linda reported that the New Jersey Department of Education should be receiving statewide park results mid-October. Districts can expect to have access to the scores about mid-November, and the results will be mailed to parents sometime after that. We don't have dates. The scores are expected to be lower than New Jersey S scores, which is normal for a new test. On October 23rd, some of the park test questions are supposed to be released. The 2016 test results are expected to be higher than 2015. And those students in 11th grade AP Language and Composition will be exempt from having to take the Park Language Arts exam. And just as a reminder, the Park math test only goes to Algebra 2. A William Ann and PTO board member asked us about the liability insurance and what PTOs are covered. And the answer was that there is limited coverage extended to PTOs under the board property liabilities policy as follows. With respect to bodily injury, property damage, personal injury, PTOs are covered by these risks only while acting on behalf of and at the direction of the Board of Education. This language is directly from the board's policy. So as long as the PTO is getting permission and filling out the proper paperwork for facility use forms and getting administrative approval for these events, they are acting on the behalf of the board and are generally covered. And then the discussion opened up onto off-site events like off-site fundraisers, some of the sports and athletic banquets, and other social events and fundraisers, some including alcohol, and what that would mean. So obviously the events with alcohol are treated a little differently and may require other insurance or extra riders. And Mr. McCarron was going to look into various scenarios and come up with some kind of guidance document to help determine when things should come to the board for approval and when things can just be approved by the PTO and principal. The busing issue came up. Mr. McCarron updated the PTO presidents about the news of our busing issue, which was discussed at our last board meeting. That situation being that the Somerset County Educational Services Commission provided us with their report that they will be running at a deficit this year, a significant expense that is not one that our district can easily absolve. So we told them about it, we talked about it, but we didn't have a lot of details yet. And Mr. McCarron and Mr. McLaughlin were going to be meeting with Hal Dunsavage from the Somerset County Ed Services Commission to just go over more details and see what our different options are. We talked about a blast. I guess there was a complaint. One of the PTO presidents brought up that there was a complaint about the blast alert that went out to parents about the photo day. And Mr. Hallett had requested that we do this blast because in the past that there were so many problems with so many parents running forms and money up to the school, and it was mass chaos, and kids were, constantly texting that they didn't have their money in their order forms. So we did this, and actually, despite the complaints, Mr. Hallett said it was a huge success, and it worked out much better, and the things ran much smoothly this year. And then we did another blast also in this last week to tell everybody, remind everybody about the early dismissal day, and it worked out well. After that, the advocacy meeting, committee meeting met, and we talked about different bus options, our concerns about different options. Some different ideas were proposed, and we're gonna talk about that more and more about busing later. We did talk about our focus goal, and the committee agreed that for the advocacy committee, the focus should be some kind of communication. And we came up with, the advocacy committee will investigate different social media tools to help our district communicate in a real-time manner with parents and students to give us more options to use in conjunction with Friday folders and blast alerts. And now actually 3 committee board members are going on Wednesday to a meeting, the Somerset County Boards Association meeting that's going to focus on social media on Wednesday. So I will report back. That's it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Karen? Can I just, if it's about busing, we're going to talk about that at board forum. Okay.
I knew it.
We'll talk about it. Okay, liaison reports. Linda, you had something, right?
Yeah, I just have some quick. The Municipal Alliance met on October 6th. but we kind of talked about the same items that Karen already went over. We talked about the, actually got more details on the Not in My Basement. There's going to be a panel consisting of the school resource officers at Ridge and William Annan, also an attorney, an emergency room doctor, and an insurance agent. So I think it should be a really good presentation. And they're also going to be showing a video showing a typical party where underage drinking takes place. And the organizers they'd like everybody to come, but they're really targeting the younger, like 8th, 9th grade parents, hoping that maybe, they can change some minds. And I don't really have too much else to report from Municipal Alliance. And then the Somerset County Ed Services Commission Board met last week, and we had two main topics on the agenda. The first was the Career Center, and the focus now is publicity and outreach for the Career Center to try to build up enrollment now that it's up and running. So there was a, Channel 12 News did a piece on the Career Center recently, and Hal said he got actually quite a few phone calls after that. The Career Center principal visited 21 school districts over the summer to give them information about the program. The superintendent, Hal Dunsavage, is doing a presentation tonight at the Hillsborough Board of Education meeting, and he's planning to go to Franklin Township and Bridgewater soon. There's an open house at the Career Center every day this week, and there's going to be a speaker on autism on October 15th. And then the other topic we talked about was transportation. There's really not much new to report on that, other than they still would like to see if there's someplace closer where they can park the buses. And they're looking at the area like around here in Bernardsville. And that's it. Any questions?
It was on. Go ahead.
John?
Where is the Career Center?
The Career Center is in Bridgewater. It's, let's see, it's where their school was. Well, it's on the same site as their special education school.
Okay.
So it's off of Findern Avenue. You're almost in Manville by the time you get there.
Okay.
And it's a really, really nice new building. Yeah.
I went one time and I did see the Career Center, but I was just wondering, do we send students through Jean and special ed here to the Career Center? Or do students go directly themselves?
No, it would be through the special services
That we
department.
provide
Yes.
here. So does Hal need to give a presentation to Jean and the administration and special services here?
Well, I know he is planning to come to several districts. He's starting with the really, really large districts where he thinks that he'll get more students. He may end up contacting us at some point.
They had some initial meetings when it was first coming online, and one of our staff was sent by Jean. I asked Jean to either go or have someone go to learn about it. So I think she's pretty well informed, but maybe now that it's up and running, they could go to another meeting to follow up on how it's going.
So he doesn't need to present to all of us, I think. We're taking care of.
If we asked him to, he
He'd be
certainly
happy to
would.
do it. Yeah.
If you're interested,
I'm
to the
okay.
extent
I've
that-
seen it. I think
Yeah.
when you see it, it's a completely different experience than getting a presentation here. Until I saw it, I didn't get it.
Anyone else have questions for Linda? Okay. We're up to public forum on other than agenda items. If anyone here would like to speak on any topic, please come up and put your name and address on the clipboard and tell us who you are. Guess there's nobody for public forum tonight. We're up to board forum, and I think people do want to talk about busing. I think Linda and Nick and I had a conversation on Friday, and because we all have been hearing different things, and Linda had been to the Ed Services meeting, and so I was trying to get up to speed on what Linda and Nick already knew. So it would be helpful, I think, for everyone to hear.
Yeah, I think that, really, we're dealing with a financial situation, and so Rod and I have been looking at a lot of numbers, and Rod has been diligently seeking more information and answers to financial questions associated with the costs of providing the busing. And, right now, we're basically looking at, 3 scenarios. One is our existing scenario, where we're running roughly 60 buses in order to get all of our transportation done. And that, of course, has associated expenses for 60 vehicles and the drivers that it takes to do those routes. Probably the greatest extreme that we could go to reduce costs from a quantity of vehicles perspective would be the triple tiering that we've talked about, because in that scenario, you could get your vehicle fleet reduced from 60 down to 30. A couple of people asked about sort of a middle-of-the-road thing where we kept 2 tiers, meaning drivers would do routes for 2 different schools, by having our 4 elementary schools on schedules that would allow for half of the schools to open at one point and the other half of the schools to open at another point. So I shared an idea that kind of mapped that out with the board as another option. So you're kind of looking at 60 vehicles or 30 vehicles or somewhere in between at 45 vehicles. And obviously, each of those scenarios has a whole set of costs that goes with them, and so we're trying to figure out, well, which one would provide the best service cost combination. Currently, the 60 bus scenario that we're running now is just not efficient enough, and we can't afford to keep doing it. So we don't see that as something that's going to continue for next year. That leaves us with either triple tiering, and trying to get all the way down to just 30 or so buses necessary to run our routes, or this other idea of essentially running 30 buses that would do, say, the high school first, and then a little while later, the middle school. That would take 30 buses. And meanwhile, 15 buses would take care of 2 elementary schools, and then a little while later, take care of the other 2 elementary schools. And that gets you to 45 vehicles. So each of those things has its pros and cons, and what we're really trying to do is get enough information where we feel like we can intelligently explain to you what the pros and cons are in terms of the staffing that it would take, the cost of providing health benefits if necessary to the staff. And one of the key driving factors is the Affordable Care Act, and how many hours per week a driver is employed, working. And anyone that hits that magical 30 hours a week becomes eligible for some form of compensation associated with health benefits. So we're looking to see if any or all of those scenarios have different things that could happen with health benefits that might work to the board's favor in terms of cost. It's just a time-consuming process to slog through and try to, essentially create a whole nother project on the side while everyone else is, well, we're all doing our regular work. So, it's hard because it's not in-house. We don't have the information at our fingertips. And the Ed Services Commission has a lot of their own things going on, like the Career Center. So, we're seeking their input and efforts to help us understand what model they think that they could provide us and what model we think we could afford. So I was hoping to try to get connected with them at some point in the next week or so for another meeting and pin them down on some more answers to some questions. Another interesting variable that's out there is that they're in negotiations this year with their bus drivers, which could also impact the cost of whatever we ultimately try to arrange with them. If they have package A or B on health benefits, obviously that cost goes back to us. So we want to talk to them about what they're thinking with respect to that as well. But I think that, from a operational standpoint, we're looking at triple tiering, which pushes dismissal times pretty late for whoever gets out last, right? We've looked at that. Or possibly this double tiering, which uses fewer buses than we currently use, but might still allow us to get the kids out at a more reasonable time, not so close to 4 o'clock. So we're looking at that and hoping that, you know, right now I'm kind of hoping that that might be the middle ground, that might be the sweet spot, but we're really not sure yet. We need more information, and we need to figure out what we think it's really going to cost and how it will affect our budget. So it's kind of like coming right down to budget season early.
I just have 2 quick questions, which you may not have information on here tonight. What's our percent ridership on the buses that we are running? And second, what's the percentage of subscriber bus riders we have, and does that really have any measurable impact on the budget?
The subscription piece.
The subscription piece is a wash for us. So, I mean, you know, what we pay them, what we collect is covering our cost there. So that's not, they're not running a cost on that. As far as the, you know, percentage of registered riders actually riding the vehicles, that's kind of a trick question, because it's whether they're entitled to it or not. If they refuse to sign a waiver and they're entitled to it, we still need to reserve a place on the bus for them, whether they use it every day or once a week or only when the weather is bad. So, you know, that's been the kind of the holy grail for districts for years, you know, try to get people to sign. But obviously, if you're entitled and you want to reserve the right to not have your child, ride the bus on a given day, you're entitled to do that.
I just have a generic question. I happened to be at Pleasant Valley Park. Okay, did I check? Okay, and I took a picture, but there's a lot of buses there in the middle of the day.
Right.
Right now, these buses stay there in the middle of the day?
Yes.
So are we paying the township? Is somebody paying the township? And if we decide to leave them overnight at Pleasant Valley Park, maybe we could do that?
Well, we right now we don't pay anything.
Okay.
And we don't leave them there overnight. And, you know, one of the major issues in leaving vehicles there overnight would be in the winter, and would be in snow events, and who's going to take responsibility for digging them out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, the buses spend the night down at the bus yard that Somerset County Ed Services has, and they take care of the plowing out and the cleaning off of the buses when we have weather events. You know, it is true that there is the possibility of some savings for the district if we didn't have to have the buses stored, you know, 15 miles from the town, because we could save at least some fuel and probably labor costs in the time it takes to bring those buses up here and the time that it takes to return the buses back to the yard at the end of the day. The savings that we might achieve from that could be offset by the cost of locating them closer to town if there was a cost associated with that. If somebody wanted to, you know, donate space for free parking and not have any expense associated with snow removal, obviously, you know, that would increase the chances that we could save a nice chunk of change, but I don't think that it's realistic because snow removal is very expensive.
They'd still need to be fueled and serviced, which...
Right, so you still end up shuttling them around when you need to do service.
When you do service. So you're not really considering that right now?
It's something that we're thinking about, but it's not the highest priority because we don't think that it offers the kind of savings that we really need. Doesn't mean that we couldn't get there someday, and it doesn't mean that we can't keep looking around, but Ed Services has told us that they've already tried that.
Oh, they have?
They've tried to find alternative places to lease or rent space that are closer. They say that it's a dry market for that purpose, but it doesn't mean we can't keep it on the radar to try and keep looking.
Okay.
Can I just follow that up real quick? Nick, is there any issue if they were here with, the drivers don't come from here. So then what happens with the,
Right, so the logistics of the drivers, right? So if wherever the vehicles are, obviously the drivers have to get to the vehicles, right? So right now, all the drivers go to the yard and they drive the vehicles up here. So if wherever the vehicles are stored, the drivers have to be able to leave their cars there. The other issue that comes into play is, if you need to have management dealing with the drivers, if there needs to be a morning meeting, if there needs to be, memos and mailboxes and things for drivers to pick up, it's not just a parking lot necessarily that you might need. So, would drivers then go to the current bus yard and have their morning meeting and then drive to the bus? And then would that save us anything besides the fuel? Because these drivers are on the clock now. They're driving up here to start their day. So maybe you just save a little bit in fuel by doing that. And is that savings offset by what you might have to pay someone to rent the space and or do snow removal? So we don't look at that as something that is automatic. If you could get someone to, if someone were donating space or services for the cause, I think it holds some real promise. Otherwise, I think that looking at the bus schedules holds a greater potential, because it comes down to the big ticket item, which is always, right, salary and health benefits. So if we can maybe have an impact on that in whatever we come up with, I think we have the best chance of trying to save some money, whether it's fewer drivers or whatever. But I agree that we should keep it on the radar and see if there might be a way to use that, if possible, somewhere. I was on Google Earth looking for overhead parking lots that seemed empty during the day. I actually did find a nearby bus place that Bev pointed out to me, but when I looked at their aerial photos, they had a very, very small parking lot with only like 10 buses wedged in it, so I don't know if they could help us. We'll see.
John?
Rod, I don't know if I heard your answer on the number of students on the bus, whether they show up or not, but the ones that are registered. What's the approximate percentage?
We don't know for sure.
Okay.
The key really, though, as I was saying, is that if you're eligible for a seat, and unless you're willing to sign a waiver, we have to reserve the space.
Right.
And the parents, for the most part, are going to reserve the right to keep that slot because they don't know when they're going to want their child to ride the bus on a given
Right.
day.
Who makes up the route schedule? Is it based on a full bus, or is it just,
Those buses are full, as I understand, in terms of the scheduled ridership. So, in fact, some of the buses I know at the middle school are kind of like your doctor's office, where they've double booked because they have a handle on over the years just what the day-to-day average ridership is. So there's not, if the thought is that we would consider reducing the number of buses, that leads us into, what is essentially a cul-de-sac that, in terms of a situation where on any given day, you don't have enough buses for the number of students that are entitled to a ride.
well, I'm sure in the high school, a lot has to do with athletic teams, by season. So, okay, thank you.
Mike?
Just to comment on that, I think the buses are scheduled 70 or so students. In other words, you put more students on paper on the bus, so it's not just a percentage of seats. It's two factors: how many are scheduled, and then what's the percentage of the seats occupied. Because we already overload them, I think.
Anyone else have any other busing questions or comments? No?
So timeline-wise, I think we're not doing anything this year, but when do you think, well, no, because if we're going to change the schedule of elementary and middle school kids, there's a domino effect with after-school activities and parent care, child care, not parent care, but child care.
Yeah, my understanding was that Ed Services, they kind of need to know by the end of the calendar year, by December, what we're willing or able to do to make this work. So we would know it before we were doing our budget.
We would
So
have
you
to
would know
make
by
some
the
kind of
end of this
decision.
year?
Yeah, so it would be fairly
already
soon.
in
We'd have to
October.
figure this out. Right, Nick?
Yep. The goal is by the end of the calendar year.
Any other busing stuff? Anybody else have anything else for board forum?
Do we have any issues with the teachers changing hours and the days and times that they have to work?
I don't think that's going to be an issue, but certainly we are negotiating with the teachers this year, so we'll vet the contract to make sure that's not going to be a problem, but they don't actually have start and stop times in their contracts.
They
No,
don't.
the times in their contracts are associated with the number of minutes of student contact time on a given day or a given week. So I don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue, but Mr. Crute might be looking at that in more detail.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else for board forum? No? Okay, we're up to adjournment. Bev, someone like to second? Linda, thank you.
You want these off or on?
Yeah, you can hit the power button in the middle of the top there. Press it and then
I know. Your school doesn't get out until, your teaching school doesn't get out until 4.
I know.